Grant Whitaker sat in the sunroom, alone as always, though sunlight hadn't touched his eyes in over a decade. He rested his fingertips against the arm of a mahogany chair, listening to the storm. The air was scented with gardenias from the open French doors, but he didn't move. His world wasn't defined by movement anymore. It was mapped by memory, routine, and the sound of other people's footsteps. "Mr. Whitaker, would you like me to bring your evening tea?" Silas's voice floated in from the hallway, calm and practiced, the way it had been since Grant's father passed and left the house, and all its burdens, in his hands. Grant didn't turn his head. "It's not even 6 yet. It's 5:58, sir." A small smile touched Grant's lips. "Then ask me again in 2 minutes." "Yes, sir." The silence returned. Grant leaned back, letting his head rest against the chair's cushion. The estate was his now, passed down with legacy and expectations he hadn't asked for. Real estate, development firms, hotel chains across the South bore his last name. In public, they still whispered his name with awe and hesitation, the blind prodigy who saved his father's empire after tragedy. In private, he was more myth than man, a recluse tucked behind Spanish moss and gated gardens, and that's exactly how he preferred it. Until recently, it started with something small, a change in the air. The soft sound of footsteps that didn't match Silas's cadence. Lighter, slower. Cautious. He hadn't asked for anyone new, but when Silas mentioned hiring a janitor to help maintain the East Wing and staff quarters, Grant hadn't argued. He didn't need to see her to know she was young, careful, and not from this kind of world. And still, she lingered in his mind more than he wanted to admit. He heard the door open across the hall, quiet. Whoever she was, she moved like she didn't want to disturb the floor. The next sound was unmistakable. A glass container knocking against marble, followed by a breath caught in the throat. She'd dropped something. He waited, expecting Silas to appear and handle it, but the silence stretched. Then, her voice, barely above a whisper. "Please don't roll." Grant stood. He didn't know why. He moved slowly toward the hallway, letting memory guide his steps. The storm outside gave him cover. No one would expect him to appear now. When he reached the corner, he paused. She was there. He couldn't see her, but he heard her. A rustle of clothes, the quiet shuffle of picking up glass, the way she muttered to herself under her breath. "I knew I should have used the tray." Her voice wasn't polished like the city women he used to entertain at charity galas. It wasn't crisp like his stepmother's or brisk like Silas's. It was soft, local, southern with a warm edge. There was a kind of truth in it that caught him off guard. "I can help with that," he said. She gasped, then silence. Grant felt the stillness like a curtain being pulled. "I didn't mean to, sir. I didn't know anyone was—" She stammered, voice trembling. "I heard something hit the floor. I figured someone needed a hand." He moved one step closer. "No harm done." She scrambled to her feet. He could hear the faint sound of glass being tucked into a tray. "I'm Lena," she said after a long pause. "Lena Matthews. I just started cleaning." He nodded slowly. "Grant Whitaker." "I know," she said, then added quickly. "I mean, I didn't mean to sound rude. Just, everyone knows." A quiet beat. He tilted his head. "And what exactly is it that everyone knows?" "That you like things quiet." And alone. The honesty startled him. It wasn't rude, just matter of fact. And she said it like someone who wasn't trying to impress him, just someone who was trying not to lose her job. "Do you always speak that directly?" "No, sir. I don't usually talk at all." Something in her voice, how small it sounded when she said that, made him feel something stir. Not pity, not interest, just recognition. "Well, Lena Matthews," he said, "you're not disturbing anything." She shifted, and he could almost feel her nod, even though he couldn't see it. "I'll clean this up, and then go." "No rush," he said. "Let the rain do its thing." Another pause. He didn't move, neither did she. "Then, do you want me to close the windows?" Grant turned his face toward the rain. "No," he said. "It's the only thing that doesn't lie." Her footsteps faded down the hall, soft again. And still, long after she left, he stood there, listening to the rain, wondering why it felt like something had shifted. Not in the house, in him. Jack. In a small cottage just 2 blocks from the estate, Lena Matthews peeled off her rain jacket and sat down hard at the tiny kitchen table. "You okay?" Aunt Pearl asked without turning from the stove. Lena nodded. "Just dropped a sugar bowl in front of Mr. Whitaker." Pearl let out a low whistle. "Did the earth stop spinning?" He offered to help. Now Aunt Pearl turned. "Come again?" Lena looked up, eyes wide. "He heard me drop it and came out. Talked to me. Said the rain doesn't lie." Pearl chuckled. "That boy always was dramatic, even when he had eyes." Lena sat back. "He's not what I expected." "You expected a monster?" "I expected silence." Pearl turned back to her cooking. "Silence can be loud, too. You just gotta listen right." Lena thought about that long after Josie went to sleep and the house fell quiet. She thought about the storm, the windows, the weight in his voice when he said, "It's the only thing that doesn't lie." She wondered what he'd lost, other than sight, and she wondered why she suddenly cared. Chapter. The next morning, Grant woke early. Silas brought in his usual breakfast tray. "Should I place your tea by the library window as always?" Grant paused. "No," he said, thoughtful. "Set it in the garden room." Silas arched a brow but said nothing, just a quiet, "Of course, sir." And somewhere down the hall, faint and careful, Lena Matthews swept the floor. Like she belonged in that house all along. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The following Monday brought with it a humid haze that settled over Savannah like a secret. The Whitaker estate, grand and ghostly as ever, woke slowly. Morning light filtered through the high windows, brushing soft gold across the marble floors and faded portraits that hadn't been taken down in years. Lena stepped into the east corridor with her mop and cleaning caddy, heart steady but cautious. She hadn't seen Mr. Whitaker since the sugar bowl incident, not properly. Just glimpses, his cane tapping through the hallway or the soft murmur of his voice from the garden room. She wasn't sure if he'd even remember her voice. Maybe she was just another sound in the long list of things that passed through his world without staying. But she remembered. He said the rain didn't lie. She still wasn't sure what that meant, but she hadn't stopped thinking about it. As she turned the corner toward the old music room, her steps faltered. The door was cracked open. Inside, faint piano notes floated into the hallway, disjointed at first, as if the player wasn't sure whether to play or not. A few notes stumbled, then paused, then came again, softer this time, deliberate. She leaned into the frame, barely breathing. There he was. Grant Whitaker, seated at the grand piano in his charcoal gray slacks and white button-down, sleeves rolled just enough to expose forearms that looked out of place on a man so otherwise still. His cane rested against the piano bench. His fingers hovered like they weren't sure the keys would welcome him back. He pressed one note, then another. Then stopped. "You just gonna stand there or come in?" Lena froze, her mouth opened, then closed again. Grant turned his head toward the door. "You shift your weight when you're nervous. Makes the floorboards creak." Right foot, left foot. Same as before. She stepped in, unsure whether to apologize or vanish. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't." He slid his fingers off the keys and folded his hands in his lap. "Just haven't played in a while." Lena nodded, forgetting for a moment that he couldn't see it. "You sounded good." "Liar," she smiled, just barely. "Okay." "A little rusty." There was a pause, not an awkward one, just quiet enough for honesty to take shape between them. "I used to play every morning," Grant said. "After the accident, I stopped." The silence felt safer. Lena stepped a little closer. "Why today?" "I don't know." He lifted his face slightly, as if listening for something. The air felt different this morning, less empty. Her breath caught. He didn't say more, but he didn't have to. She turned toward the windows, searching for something safe to ask. "What kind of music did you play before?" "Mostly jazz. My mother loved Coltrane. She said every good day starts with a little chaos and a horn." Lena chuckled. "Sounds like something Aunt Pearl would say." "Your aunt?" "She raised me. Said jazz was the only thing God created on earth that came straight from the soul." Grant smiled, then reached out to touch the closed lid of the piano. "She sounds like a woman I'd have liked." "You'd better mean that," Lena teased softly, "or she'll come marching up here and tell you herself." "Is that a threat, Miss Matthews?" "Only a promise." His smile deepened, not wide, but real. The kind that carried weight and warmth. Lena stepped back, realizing the air was getting heavier, emotionally, not just with humidity. "I should get back to work," she said, motioning to her mop like it had been waiting. Grant nodded once. "Of course." As she turned, he said quietly, "Thank you." She paused. "For what?" "For talking to me like I'm not made of glass." Lena met his gaze, even if he couldn't meet hers. "You're not made of glass, Mr. Whitaker. You're made of stories. And I think you've got a few more left in you." She left him in the music room, fingers hovering once again over the keys. That afternoon, the estate's routine unfolded like a southern lullaby. Clock chimes, the scent of lemon polish, distant ceiling fans humming. Lena moved through the kitchen, refilling the supply cart, when Silas entered with his usual purposeful stride. He glanced at her over his reading glasses. "You went into the music room today." Lena turned. "I knocked." "You didn't need to." "I'm not warning you, just observing." Silas leaned against the counter, folding his arms. "He doesn't play for anyone." "Hasn't in years. He barely played for me." "But he opened the lid. That's something." Lena looked down at the mop bucket, unsure what to say. Silas pushed his glasses up. "He listens for sincerity. That's how he moves through the world now, sound and intention." "You speak in full sentences. Most people don't anymore." She tried not to smile, but failed. Silas pushed off the counter. "Keep being you, Miss Matthews. It's more valuable than you realize." Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind layers of Spanish moss, Grant stood in the garden room again, hand resting on the window frame. He heard her humming. It was faint but familiar, a slow melody, something old, Etta James maybe. He followed the sound, careful on the steps, letting the rhythm guide him. The patio stones were still warm from the sun. Lena knelt in the garden bed near the back fountain, pulling weeds with quiet determination, sleeves rolled and hair tied back. He paused a few feet away. "That Etta." She looked up, startled. "I didn't know you were out here," she said. "You hum when you work. It's how I knew." She stood slowly. "Old habits." "Aunt Pearl says work hums keep the spirits happy." She might be right. A beat passed between them. "I like it," he added. "Makes this place feel less haunted." Lena's brows lifted. "You think your house is haunted?" "Not by ghosts, just memories." She softened. "I can't do much about memories. But I can plant new things." Her hand gestured to a small tray of seedlings beside her. Grant took a hesitant step forward. "Describe it to me." She knelt again. "These are zinnias, bright, loud things. Red, orange, pink. Fireworks in flower form. Aunt Pearl says they're too proud to apologize." He smiled. "Sounds like someone I know. I'll take that as a compliment." Grant crouched beside her, slowly, fingertips grazing the edge of the soil. "Can I?" She gently guided his hand toward the soft bloom of a marigold. "There." she whispered. His breath hitched slightly. I forgot what they smelled like, he said. Lena looked at him, really looked. And for a moment, he wasn't the blind heir or the untouchable recluse. He was just a man remembering something beautiful. The moment lingered, suspended in the scent of soil and late-day sun. And just before the silence took over again, Lena whispered, You can plant new things too, if you want to. Grant's voice came slow, low. Maybe I will. Neither of them moved, and the garden, for the first time in years, felt like it was waking up. The next few days moved like soft wind over still water. The estate returned to its usual rhythm, clocks chiming on the hour, Silas moving with purpose through the halls, and Lena sweeping each corner like she was trying to polish time itself. But something between Lena and Grant had changed. It wasn't spoken, not directly, but she noticed how he always seemed to know when she entered a room. How he'd pause mid-sentence when she passed nearby. How his usually curt tone softened when addressing her. And Grant. He noticed how her voice lingered longer now when she said, Good morning. How her footsteps slowed near the garden room. How her laugh, quiet, unforced, settled under his skin and stayed there. Still, they both pretended not to notice. Until the book. It was late afternoon, the kind where the light turns gold and stretches long shadows across the floors. Lena had just finished wiping down the windows in the study when her eyes caught the edge of a thick, leather-bound book on the table. She hesitated. It wasn't part of the regular clutter. It looked lived in. Braille tabs stuck out from the side, and a silk ribbon marked the place. Curiosity tugged at her. She looked around. The house was quiet. Silas was in town. Grant was likely in the back garden, where he spent most afternoons since she'd planted the marigolds. Lena stepped closer and turned the book gently. The Great Gatsby. She exhaled a soft laugh. Somehow she hadn't expected that. She ran her fingers along the cover, feeling the raised letters. Then, without meaning to, she opened to the bookmarked page. A section had been marked in Braille, the ink text still visible beneath. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it. Lena read the line twice, then a third time. It hit somewhere in her chest. She imagined Grant reading it with his fingertips, late at night, listening to the storm through his window. Alone. Always alone. You know, that book's got more ghosts than this house. The voice startled her. She spun around, and there he was, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely, head slightly tilted. Her throat tightened. I wasn't trying to snoop. You weren't. His tone wasn't cold, just unreadable. You read that quote out loud. She swallowed, placing the book back carefully. It's a good quote. It is. He stepped inside, slowly, with that quiet confidence that always felt just a touch rehearsed. You like Gatsby? I didn't used to. Thought it was all glitz and heartbreak. But now, I guess I understand it better. Grant smiled faintly. It's not a love story. It's a warning. That's what makes it real. The silence between them stretched, comfortable, but heavy with things unsaid. Grant ran his hand across the desk, finding the edge of the book. I used to read that chapter over and over. I think I was trying to convince myself that even flawed men could still be worth loving. Lena's voice softened. You think you're flawed? He gave a short laugh. I know I am. You're not Gatsby. No, he said. but I know what it's like to live in a house full of things and still feel like you own nothing that matters. That settled between them like dust in sunlight. Lena stepped forward, slowly. "Then why do you stay here?" Grant turned his head toward the open window. "It's easier to hide in a house like this. The world assumes you've got everything you need, so they stop asking questions." "I'm not the world." He faced her then, his eyes clouded, unfocused, but locked toward the sound of her voice. "No," he said. "You're not." Her breath caught. "Do you want me to stop coming around?" she asked quietly. "No." The word came quick, too quick. He seemed to catch himself. "I mean, not unless you want to." Lena hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't." A quiet beat passed. "I should get back to cleaning," she said, taking a small step back. He nodded once but didn't move. As she turned to leave, he called softly, "Lena." She stopped. "Thank you for seeing more than just the walls." Her heart twisted, and when she walked away, the words followed her like footprints. That took to her. That evening, the sky poured without warning. A summer downpour, thick, hard, and sudden, the kind that washes the streets clean and forces every thought indoors. Lena sat by her bedroom window, watching the rain blur the edges of the world outside. Josie was asleep in the next room, soft breathing rising and falling like a lullaby. Pearl walked in with a folded quilt in her arms. "You've been quiet lately." Lena glanced up. "Just thinking." "About Mr. Whitaker?" Lena sighed. "That obvious?" "You've always had a tell. You hum less when something's on your mind." Lena pulled her knees up to her chest. "It's complicated." Pearl sat beside her, smoothing the quilt over Lena's lap. "Good things usually are. He's kind, thoughtful, even if he hides it, but he's stuck in his own world. And I don't belong in it." Pearl was silent for a moment. Then she said, "When your sister passed, you didn't belong in that hospital room either, but you showed up. You stayed. Sometimes it's not about fitting in. Sometimes it's about showing up for someone who doesn't expect it." Lena swallowed the lump rising in her throat. Pearl looked her straight on. "You have a good heart, child. But hearts need shelter too." The rain softened outside. And somewhere, beneath that same rain, Grant sat alone at his piano again. Not playing, just listening. Listening for something only one person had made him feel in a very long time. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The estate woke that Friday with a tension in the air, subtle but undeniable. The kind of energy you can't see but feel, like a shift in wind before a storm. Lena noticed it the moment she stepped through the back entrance. The light was different. Brighter somehow, too sharp. Silas stood at the foot of the main staircase, his arms crossed over a clipboard, posture tighter than usual. He nodded politely when she passed, but didn't speak. Something was off. She followed the hallway toward the west parlor, only to hear voices, one of them familiar. The other? Sharp, cold, polished like marble. "Oh, Grant, you let dust settle on the crown molding." "And what is that smell in here? Citrus?" Lena froze just out of view. "Fresh lemon oil," Grant said evenly. "Silas started using it last spring." "Well, it smells like a cleaning aisle," the woman sniffed. This place used to have character. Lena peeked around the corner. A tall, elegant woman stood by the fireplace in a silk blouse the color of pearls. Her silver blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun. No emotion on her face, just calculated disapproval. Margaret Whittaker, Grant's stepmother. Lena had never seen her in person, but she recognized the energy. Every small southern town had a woman like that. The kind who always made sure you knew you didn't belong. Grant, sitting in his usual armchair, tilted his head slightly. "You're welcome to leave if the lemon's too offensive." Margaret's heels clicked against the floor as she moved closer. "Don't be dramatic, B. I'm here because you're stalling. The board needs a decision. I've already given one. You can't mean it." She poured herself a glass of water without asking. "This estate is worth a fortune." "And what are you doing with it? Letting weeds take over the back garden? Hosting invisible guests?" Grant's voice dropped an octave. "Careful," Margaret sipped calmly. "I'm just saying, there are better ways to use this land. Boutique hotel. Event venue. You know it. Your father would have known it. My father also believed in keeping what mattered." Margaret set the glass down with a soft clink. "You're clinging to ghosts, Grant, and now you've got staff roaming the place like their family." That cut deep. Lena could feel it from the hallway, like a thread pulled too tight. Grant sat in silence for a moment before replying. "Silas is family." "I wasn't talking about Silas." Silence again. Lena's heart pounded. Then, slowly, Grant rose to his feet. No sharpness in his movement. Just control. "Do you need anything else, Margaret?" Margaret gave a thin smile. "A signed contract would be lovely. I'll be staying the weekend. I assume you still keep the blue suite ready?" Grant didn't respond. Lena backed away quietly, heart in her throat. Later that afternoon, Lena sat in the garden with her gloves still on, pretending to focus on trimming the marigolds. But her hands were shaking. "What are you really doing out here?" Grant's voice drifted behind her. She turned, startled. "I didn't hear you." "You hum when you work." "You weren't humming." She tried to smile. "Just got a lot on my mind." He stepped closer, his cane grazing the stone path, but his voice was steady. "Margaret can do that to a person. You didn't tell me she was visiting." "I didn't know until she showed up." Lena hesitated, unsure how far to tread. "She doesn't seem to like this place much. She doesn't like anything she can't control." Grant's jaw tightened. "Especially me. She mentioned the estate. She wants me to sell it, turn it into something useful." Lena glanced around. "This place is already useful. It holds you together." He was quiet. Then he said softly, "She mentioned you." Lena's breath caught. "I didn't respond," he added quickly, "but I should have stopped her sooner." Lena looked down at the dirt under her nails. "I'm not embarrassed. You shouldn't be. But I am aware." "Of?" "How different our worlds are." Grant stepped forward, then sat on the edge of the stone bench near her. "Difference isn't the problem, Lena. Distance is." She looked at him, really looked, his face calm, unreadable, but his voice held more weight than usual. "I didn't mean for things to change," she whispered. "I just wanted to do a good job. They changed anyway." Silence stretched between them, thick as moss. "I don't want to cause problems," she added. "You're not," he said quickly, firmly. "You're the only thing lately that feels like it's not pretending." Lena's voice trembled. "Then why does it feel like we're crossing a line?" He turned his head toward her. "Because maybe we are." Her throat tightened. "And if we do?" He didn't answer right away. Then finally, "Then we make sure the line meant something." She stood abruptly, the tension too much. "I should go. I left something boiling on the stove back home." "Lena." She turned halfway. "I don't care what Margaret says, or anyone else." "You're not invisible in this house." She nodded once, then walked away quickly, afraid that if she stayed, she'd say something she couldn't take back. Margaret was waiting in the hallway when Lena came back inside to grab her things. "You must be Miss Matthews." Lena froze. "Yes, ma'am." Margaret smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I hear you've made quite the impression." Lena didn't respond. "You should enjoy your time here while it lasts. Old houses don't hold on to new help for long." Still, Lena said nothing. Margaret leaned in slightly. "We all have a place, dear." "It's best when we stay in it." Lena lifted her chin, voice low but steady. "And sometimes places change." She didn't wait for a reply. She walked out the back door, heart pounding, breath caught between fear and fire. Outside, the evening air was heavy with magnolia and storm. And somewhere behind her, Grant stood in the hallway, cane in hand, listening. He hadn't missed a word. The storm rolled in just past 7, draping the Savannah sky in a heavy blue-gray haze that pressed down on the Whitaker estate like a secret trying to break loose. Lena stood at the far edge of the garden, the wind teasing her hair loose from its clip. She hadn't meant to stay this late. She told Aunt Pearl she'd be back before sundown, but the tension in the house had built all day like rising humidity, thick, electric, waiting to snap. She needed the air. Grant hadn't spoken to her since the moment in the garden. And Margaret's words still clung to her like thorns. "You should enjoy your time here while it lasts." Lena dug her hands into the soil, pretending she could root herself deeper with the marigolds. But even the ground felt unsettled. Behind her, the garden door creaked open. She didn't have to turn. "I thought you hated storms," Grant said. His voice was steady but low, almost careful. "I don't hate them," she replied. "They just remind me of things. Good things or bad? Both." He stepped onto the stone path, the soft tap of his cane rhythmically trailing beside him. "They always remind me of silence," he said. "Not the absence of sound, but the kind that comes after something breaks." Lena looked down at her dirt-covered gloves. "You heard Margaret." "I did. She wanted me to hear it. I know." They stood in quiet for a moment, the air pulsing with wind and rising thunder. "She said we all have a place," Lena said softly. "And hers is somewhere near the top." Grant's expression didn't change, but his jaw tensed. "She sees the world as a ladder. And you? I see it as a room. Some people just slam the door shut before you can walk in." The rain began, slow at first, then heavier. A drop landed on Lena's cheek and ran like a tear. "She doesn't scare me," Lena said, almost surprising herself. "I'm glad," he replied. "Because she scares me." She looked up. "You don't sound scared." "That's because I learned a long time ago that fear speaks quietly, and I've spent years listening to quiet things." Lightning lit the sky behind the magnolia trees. The house loomed behind them, shadowed and still. "You don't have to defend me," Lena said. "I can take care of myself." "I know you can," Grant said. "But maybe I don't want you to do it alone." Her breath hitched. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, like a confession he hadn't planned to make. "I didn't come here for attention, Mr. Whitaker." "Grant." She looked up. "What?" "Call me Grant." Her voice was a whisper. "Okay, Grant." He took another step closer, slowly, and sat beside her on the edge of the raised garden bed. "I keep thinking," he said quietly, "about the first time I heard you in this garden. You were humming something. And I remember thinking, if I turned around, the sound might vanish, like a dream." Lena felt her throat tighten. "But you didn't vanish," he continued. "You stayed. You let me." "No, I didn't stop you. That's different." The rain thickened. It fell around them like a curtain, soaking into the ground, into their clothes, into every inch of space they hadn't dared cross before. "Tell me something true," he said. Lena hesitated. "Why?" "Because everything in this house is covered in old stories. I want something real." She looked out over the garden, then said, "I wasn't supposed to take this job." Grant turned his head toward her. "My sister passed 2 years ago, left me with her little girl and a stack of hospital bills I still haven't paid off. I was working 3 jobs when Aunt Pearl pulled some strings to get me in here. Said cleaning old houses was honest work with quiet corners." Grant didn't speak. "I didn't want to be here," she said. "I didn't want to feel small, or like I was being watched, but then you—" Her voice broke. Grant's hand reached out slightly, fingers unsure. She placed hers in his. "You asked me about music," she said. "No one's done that in years." "I miss it," he said. "I miss sound meaning something. You're not the only one." They sat there, rain soaking their shoulders, not bothering to move. "When Margaret talks," Lena said, "it feels like I'm stealing something by being here." "You're not, but it feels like it." Grant turned his face toward her voice. "Then let me say this as clearly as I can." She waited. "This house has been dead for a long time, full of footsteps that never led anywhere, until you." Her eyes stung, but not from the rain. "Grant, I don't need you to stay," he said, "but I hope you do." She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. And when her fingers tightened around his, it wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a promise. The storm pressed harder, but they stayed, together, soaked and silent, not pretending anymore. By Monday morning, the rain had stopped, but it left behind a hush. The kind of stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to shift. The Whitaker estate, gleaming under fresh sun, looked unchanged. But inside, something had moved. Lena stepped into the kitchen with her usual grace, her shoes leaving faint prints across the just-mopped tiles. She paused when she saw Silas leaning against the counter, sipping coffee, a letter folded in his hand. "You're early," he said without looking up. "I like to start before the heat sets in." He nodded, then held the letter out to her. "This came from Mr. Whitaker, but the envelope was thin. I held it up to the light." "Legal header." Lena frowned. "You read his mail?" "I said I held it to the light, not opened it. There's a difference." Silas's tone wasn't defensive, just matter of fact. "Think it's about the estate?" He didn't answer, just sipped again. "Margaret left this morning." "Didn't say goodbye." Lena folded her arms. "Good. She doesn't disappear unless she's planning something. Then let her plan. It won't change anything." Silas finally looked at her, his gaze sharp and measuring. "It might. You think he's strong, and in many ways he is, but not when it comes to losing things." Lena's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to take anything." Silas set the coffee down, then sighed. "You're not. That's the problem. Because you're the first thing he's wanted that isn't about control." Before she could answer, Grant's voice came from the hall. "Is someone going to tell me what we're whispering about?" Lena turned. He was standing in the doorway, cane in hand, wearing a soft blue shirt rolled to the elbows. He looked almost casual, but his tone said he'd caught every edge of tension. "Mail," Silas said quickly. "Legal stuff." Grant reached out. "Give it here." Lena handed him the letter, her fingers brushing his. It lingered, just for a breath. He felt the edges, ran his thumb over the seal, then slipped it into his back pocket. "Later." Then he tilted his head slightly toward Lena. "Walk with me?" She nodded. "Sure." They moved through the hall and out into the garden, where the soil was dark and soft underfoot. The air smelled of wet grass and promise. Grant's steps were steady, confident, but Lena could feel the hesitation behind them. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally. "Do what?" "Stand up to Margaret." Lena hesitated. "I didn't plan to. It just happened. She's not used to being challenged, especially not by someone she can't dismiss." Lena stopped walking, turning to him. "And am I someone to be dismissed?" His mouth quirked. "Not even slightly." They paused beside the magnolia tree. The branches hung low, the petals soft and bruised from the storm. "I've been thinking," Grant said, voice quieter now, "about the house, about what I'm doing with it." She waited, sensing the weight behind the words. "I used to think keeping it was about legacy, about holding on to something my father built." His fingers grazed the bark. "But lately I've started wondering if maybe it could be more than just a monument." Lena tilted her head. "More? Something alive, something that doesn't echo. You want to open it? To the right people. The community, the kids, maybe turn the West Wing into a studio space." "Music, dance, art," Lena's breath caught. "You mean that?" "I do, but I can't do it alone." She smiled. "You won't have to." Just then, a voice broke the moment. "Well, isn't this cozy?" They turned. Charles. He stood at the edge of the garden, crisp suit despite the heat, sunglasses perched on his head like an afterthought. Lena instinctively stepped back. "Didn't mean to interrupt," Charles said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I stopped by to speak with Silas." "Thought I'd say hello." Grant's shoulders stiffened. "Charles." "Still brooding, I see. Some things never change." Lena stayed silent. Charles's gaze shifted to her. "And you must be the reason Savannah's buzzing." Lena gave him a neutral smile. "Just here to clean floors and water plants." He laughed. "Right, of course." Grant's tone sharpened slightly. "You've said hello. Now say goodbye." Charles chuckled, then tipped an imaginary hat to Lena. "Pleasure." He walked off, whistling something tuneless. Grant turned toward her, expression unreadable. "You okay?" "I'm fine." He reached for her hand, found it and held it. "He doesn't matter." "No," she said, her voice firm. "But what people say might." Grant's grip tightened slightly. "Then let them talk. I've been blind for 10 years, Lena. I stopped caring what people think the day I realized none of them were looking at me to begin with." She blinked hard. "I'm not afraid of what people say," he added. "But I am afraid of pushing you away because I didn't say enough when I should have." Lena looked at him, really looked, and saw the edges of vulnerability that he kept so tightly stitched. "You haven't pushed me away," she said. "But I need to know you're not holding me at arm's length just to protect yourself." "I don't want to protect myself anymore," he whispered. "I just want something real." Her voice trembled. "Then stop waiting for the world to give you permission." The air between them stilled. And this time, when they didn't speak, it wasn't silence. It was understanding. The whispers started slow. A passing glance in the bakery, a woman leaning across a church pew to murmur something behind a pressed smile. 2 boys snickering near the corner store as Lena walked by, Josie's hand tucked in hers. By the time Friday rolled around, the whispers had weight. "Did you hear? I thought she was just the janitor. They say he walks with her in the garden. Like they're together." Lena had grown up in Savannah. She knew how this town worked, how people talked when they didn't understand something, or worse, when they did. She stood by the sink in Aunt Pearl's kitchen, rinsing a dish slowly, her jaw tight. "They look at me like I tricked him," she said. Pearl stirred sugar into her tea. "That's because they can't understand a man wanting someone who isn't chasing him." Lena turned. "It's more than that. They act like I've broken some rule." "You have." Pearl said plainly. You let a man like that see you. You didn't pretend. You didn't try to impress him, and now they're scared, because what if that's all love really needs? Lena looked down, her hands trembling. Does he know? Pearl asked. Lena shook her head. He can't see the way they stare, the way they lean in after I pass by. He hears plenty, sure, but it's not the same. Do you want to tell him? I don't want to embarrass him. I don't want him to feel like I'm some burden he has to defend. Pearl sipped her tea. Then you need to decide something, child. Are you here for peace or for truth? Because you can't have both, not when love is involved. Lena didn't sleep much that night. Saturday morning, the estate was quiet. The kind of quiet that felt suspicious, like it was watching you. Lena stepped into the garden room and found Grant seated by the open window, his fingers moving slowly across the keys of a piano she hadn't seen him touch in days. The melody was soft, hesitant. She stood silently for a moment, watching him lean into the sound, like it was a conversation only he could hear. I missed that, she said finally. Grant paused, then smiled without turning. I was hoping you'd walk in. You always know. I'm learning your rhythm. She stepped closer. Can we talk? He nodded and gestured to the seat beside him. Lena sat, folding her hands in her lap. The sunlight through the tall window landed gently across her shoulder, warming the edge of her nervousness. People are talking, she said quietly. Grant exhaled as if he already knew. Let me guess. Margaret's latest donation came with a side of gossip. It's not just her. Savannah's always been small on size, big on noise. Lena looked at him carefully. It doesn't bother you? What, that they're talking? He shrugged. They've been talking about me for 10 years. First, it was how fast I closed the first deal after my accident. Then how I must have lost my mind, staying in this house like a ghost. Now, it's about you. She nodded. And that's different. Yes, he said, his voice dropping. Because this matters. He turned toward her, as best he could. Do you want to leave? The question hit like a stone in her chest. No, she said. But I don't want you to feel like you have to prove anything. I don't, he said, but I will. She stared at him, caught between awe and fear. Why? Because you've given me something real. And the only thing worse than losing sight is never seeing something clearly when it's right in front of you. Her voice cracked. What if it gets worse? What if people start looking at you like you've made a mistake? He reached for her hand. Then let them. I stopped needing their approval the day I stopped seeing their faces, but I need yours. She didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered, Then come with me. Grant's brow furrowed. Where? To the recital, she said. Josie's performing tomorrow at the church hall. She's terrified, but I think, if you're there. He didn't hesitate. Tell me what time. Sunday evening, the church hall buzzed with soft chatter and the scuffle of polished shoes on tile floors. Kids in makeshift costumes ran down the aisles while parents juggled flowers and folding chairs. Lena stood near the side door, watching the crowd. Grant arrived just before curtain. Silas guided him in quietly, but people noticed. Heads turned, murmurs rippled. That's him. The Whitaker heir. Blind, right? Is that her with him? Grant tilted his head. They're staring. They are. Describe it to me. Lena looked around. Some surprised, some confused. One woman dropped her program. Grant smiled. That's progress. He took her hand, not to guide him, to show them. The lights dimmed, the curtain lifted. Josie stepped onto the small stage, her braids pulled back, her eyes wide. But when she spotted Lena and Grant in the crowd, something shifted in her posture. She danced, not perfectly, but with her whole heart. And when the final note played and the crowd clapped, Lena leaned toward Grant and whispered, "She saw you. I felt it." They stayed seated as the crowd filtered out. No one said anything to them directly, but the whispers. They changed tone, respect, surprise, maybe even something close to admiration. Grant turned toward Lena as the room emptied. That felt like a beginning. It was. He reached for her hand again, more sure this time. "Then let's stop apologizing for it." Lena nodded, heart full. She'd walked into this life expecting to clean someone else's mess. Now, she was helping build something new. And she wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. The morning after the recital, the Whitaker estate was drenched in light. Sunbeams pouring through tall windows like liquid gold. The garden glistened with dew, birds trilled in the magnolia trees, and for once the house didn't feel like it was waiting for something to go wrong. Lena stood in the greenhouse, sleeves rolled up, hands in the soil. The sun warmed her shoulders. She worked slowly, carefully repotting a young rose bush, her mind still lingering on the look on Josie's face the night before, confident, open, proud. She hadn't seen her niece that free in a long time. Behind her, the door creaked open. She didn't need to turn. "You always this quiet after victory?" Grant's voice carried a smile. "I don't think of it as a victory." "Then what?" "A moment. One I don't want to scare off by naming it too loud." He chuckled and walked in, guided by the tap of his cane. She reached out, gently taking his arm, guiding him past the garden bench to a spot where the roses had just started to bloom. "Here," she said, placing his hand near the petals. Grant leaned in, inhaling deeply. "That one's not lemon oil." "Nope. English rose. Smells like honey and sunlight. Sounds like a line from one of your books." He smiled faintly. "Or one of your prayers." Lena sat beside him on the edge of a stone planter. "You haven't asked me yet." "Asked you what?" "What comes next?" Grant tilted his head. "I figured if I stayed quiet long enough, you'd tell me." She looked down at the gloves in her lap. "People are still talking. I figured they would be. They're just waiting for the shine to fade." Grant's voice lowered. "Do you think it will?" She hesitated. "I'm scared." He turned toward her voice. "Of what?" "Of hoping for something I'm not allowed to keep." A long silence. Then Grant reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "This came yesterday." She frowned. "What is it?" "A property claim. Margaret's pushing the board to force a partial sale. Says I'm sitting on dead assets." Lena's mouth tightened. "Can she do that?" "She can try." "And what will you do?" "I'm going to fight it." She looked at him. "You sure?" "She's trying to make the house about numbers. But I'm finally starting to see it as something else." He paused, then added, "A beginning." Lena studied his face, the way it softened around her now, the way he tilted toward her when she breathed, like her presence filled in the lines sight used to draw for him. "I think I've fallen for you," she said quietly. It wasn't a question, and he didn't flinch. "I think I've been waiting to hear you say that," he replied. Her breath shook. "I didn't say it so you'd return it." "I know," he said. "That's how I know it's real." She looked out at the garden, suddenly overwhelmed. "I've spent so long keeping my head down," she said. "I'm not used to being chosen." He reached out, gently brushing his hand along her wrist. "Then, let me say it in a way you'll believe." He stood, his stance sure despite the lack of sight. I don't need the world's approval, Lena. I need yours. I don't care if they talk, if they laugh, if they try to tear this house apart. I will not pretend that what's grown between us is something to be hidden or denied. She stood too, slowly. I'm not ashamed of you. I know. I'm afraid for you. That's love, he said. That's the cost of it. They stood in the greenhouse, surrounded by green shoots and growing things, the air humid with life. Lena whispered, "Then let's make it worth the cost." Later that afternoon, Lena walked into the town market to grab fresh rosemary for Silas's dinner stew. As she passed the bakery window, she saw two women whisper behind a newspaper. This time she didn't flinch. She walked right up to the counter, handed over a few dollars for the herbs, and smiled so wide it startled the clerk. On the way out, she paused and looked directly at the two women. "Evening." They blinked, caught off guard. Lena nodded once, then walked away. And for the first time since she'd taken the job at the Whitaker estate, she walked like the road belonged to her too. That night, as the moon rose behind the oaks, Grant sat on the front porch with Silas, a bourbon glass untouched beside him. "She loves this place now," Grant said. "She loves what it's becoming," Silas corrected. Grant nodded. "She's made it breathe again." Silas leaned back in his chair. "So have you. You think it'll last?" "You're asking the wrong question," Silas said. "The question is, will you fight for it when it's tested?" Grant smiled faintly. "It already is." They sat in silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. Inside, Lena lit a single candle in the garden room window, and the estate, for the first time in years, felt like it had a pulse. The heat had settled over Savannah like a held breath. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate, unwilling to disturb the fragile balance of calm that had wrapped itself around the Whitaker estate. Inside the main house, the rhythm was almost musical. Silas humming in the kitchen, the ceiling fans creaking like old metronomes, and Lena's soft steps trailing through the west corridor. She paused in front of the old greenhouse blueprints, pinned to a corkboard beside the study door. They'd been sketching ideas all week, turning dreams into floor plans. An arts center. A garden classroom. Space for kids like Josie, for neighbors who'd never stepped foot on the estate, for voices long overlooked. It was becoming something more than a plan. It was becoming a promise. "You're staring at it again," Grant's voice came from behind her, soft but amused. She turned. "Just checking the layout. It hasn't changed in the last 20 minutes. "No, but it could." He stepped closer, tapping his cane once on the floor to center himself. "What's missing?" Lena hesitated. "A dance floor. Wood. Real finish. Enough room for 8, maybe 10 kids to move without knocking over the potted plants." Grant nodded. "Consider it done. You haven't even looked at the numbers." "I don't need to." "I can hear the way you just said that. You see it." She smiled, slow and full. "You're getting good at that." "At what?" "Listening between the words." He smiled back. "You taught me." Lena stepped closer and slipped her hand into his. "Promise me something. Anything. When the contractors come and the town starts really watching, promise me you won't shrink back." Grant's brow lifted. "Have I ever shrunk from anything?" "You've kept the world at arm's length for 10 years, Grant." Us, it's not just about opening a house, it's about opening yourself." He grew quiet, and then a soft breath. "I know. I'm trying." "You're doing more than trying." A long pause followed. Then he leaned forward just enough to rest his forehead lightly against hers. "I never thought I'd be rebuilding anything," he whispered. "You're not doing it alone." They stood like that for a moment, still and steady, until the power flickered. The lights above them dimmed, then sparked, then cut out completely. Silence followed, thick and sudden. Then, an eerie hum from the hall. Lena straightened. That didn't sound right. Grant tilted his head, listening. Was that the breaker? I'll check it. No, he said, already moving toward the corridor. If it's wiring, I need to know how far it's spread. Come with me. They made their way through the hallway, their shadows flickering as the backup generator buzzed to life. Only a few emergency lights blinked on, casting the house in strange orange glows and long, warped silhouettes. Lena led them toward the kitchen, where Silas stood with a flashlight in hand, inspecting the breaker panel. Overload on the secondary grid, he said. Old wiring in the east wing finally gave out. Lena frowned. Is there a risk? Could be. Smells faintly like scorched insulation. Grant's face went still. How bad? Silas shook his head. I shut the main before it traveled. No flames, just a fried panel. Grant exhaled. Call your guy. First thing. I already did. Lena stepped forward. Should we stay somewhere else tonight, just until it's fixed? No, Grant said firmly. The house isn't dangerous, but let's keep the west wing closed off. You and Josie can sleep in the guest suite. Lena blinked. You thought I meant leave the house. You sounded like you were bracing to run. I wasn't. He turned toward her, and even in the dim light, his presence steadied the room. I've had enough people walk away when things break, he said. I'm not asking you to be one of them. I'm not, she said gently. But I've also learned that staying sometimes means knowing when to move out of the way. I don't want distance. I don't want regrets. The tension between them stretched, not like a fight, more like the edge of a decision neither had fully voiced. Silas cleared his throat. I'll finish the inspection. Grant nodded. Lena touched his elbow lightly, guiding him back down the hall. When they reached the main parlor, he sank into the armchair nearest the window. The room was dim but calm. Lena stood beside him, arms folded. He tilted his face toward her. Is this what it's going to be like? What? Good days that end in small disasters. Big plans that stall out from old wiring and older grudges. Probably. He smiled. Good. She frowned. Good? It means we're doing something real. Lena laughed softly. You're the only man I know who can romanticize a blown fuse. I'm not trying to romanticize it, he said. I'm just saying, everything I've built before now was cold and clean. It didn't crack. But it never felt alive. And this does? Yes, he said. Because you're in it. The words landed like a ripple across still water. Then the sound of small footsteps echoed from the hallway. Miss Lena? Josie's voice was sleepy and cautious. Lena turned. Sweetheart? What are you doing up? I heard noises. Lights were weird. It's okay, Lena said, kneeling. Just a power issue. Nothing scary. Josie looked at Grant, eyes wide. You can't see, right? That's right. Does it make the dark feel less scary? Grant thought for a moment. Sometimes it does. Because I know the dark isn't empty. It's just waiting for the right light. Josie nodded slowly. I like that. Grant smiled. Me too. Lena stood, brushing a hand over Josie's hair. Come on, let's get you settled. She led her down the hall but looked back once. Grant was still sitting there, the faintest glow of the emergency light brushing his features, and for a man who lived in darkness, he looked remarkably full of light. The new electrical panel was installed by Tuesday. The lights flickered on with a satisfying click, the hum of energy threading back through the walls of the old estate like a heartbeat resuming after a long sleep. But even as the house brightened, something between Lena and Grant had started to dim. She noticed it in the way he hesitated before calling her name, the slight distance in his voice, the quiet that settled between conversations that used to feel seamless. Grant had retreated into his thoughts, and Lena didn't know how to follow him there. By Thursday afternoon, the estate buzzed with movement again. Contractors pacing through the West Wing. Silas directing work crews. Laughter echoing from the garden as Josie played hopscotch with two neighbor girls Lena had invited over for lemonade. Grant, however, had locked himself away in the library. Lena stood outside the door, hand poised to knock, unsure why her chest felt so heavy. She finally opened it. Grant sat in his leather armchair by the window, braille papers spread across his lap, a furrow etched deep between his brows. "Too loud?" she asked softly. "No," he replied, his voice distant. "Just thinking." She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. "The community board wants to meet next week. They're asking about the greenhouse project and the new arts center proposal." He nodded but didn't speak. "Grant," she tried again. He shifted. "I've been looking over the numbers." She moved closer. "Is there a problem?" "No, not a problem, just pressure." Lena's stomach turned. "From Margaret?" "From everyone," he said, a little too fast. "The estate, the trust, the legal threads wrapped around this house. I'm realizing how deep they go." "Okay," she said carefully, "but we can figure it out. Together." "I know," he said, but his tone was flat, not cold, just far. Lena sat across from him. "You're pulling back." He hesitated. "I'm trying not to." "Then stop thinking like a businessman and start talking like the man who stood in the rain with me 3 weeks ago." That made him flinch, but it also made him look up. His voice cracked slightly. "I'm scared I'm building something I can't hold on to." Lena leaned forward. "You're not building this alone. That's the thing, Lena. I don't know how to be part of something and not control it. I don't know how to love someone without wondering what happens when they walk away. I'm not your past." "I know," he whispered, "but I don't know how to stop reacting like I am." The words landed between them, sharp and quiet. Lena stood slowly. "I came here for a job, but I stayed because this house, because you, started to feel like something honest." He looked down. "But if this, us, is going to survive whatever's coming, you have to let me stand beside you, not behind you." He nodded slowly. "You're right. Then let me in." Grant reached out, uncertainly at first, and Lena took his hand, anchoring it in both of hers. "There's one more thing," he said. She waited. "I got a call from a non-profit in Charleston. They want me to consult on a similar restoration project. A 6-month residency. They read about the recital in the center. They want to fly me in next month." Lena blinked. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't know how." She sat back. "Do you want to go?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me says it's the next right step. But the other part thinks it's an escape." His silence confirmed it. Lena rose, voice steady but low. "I won't stop you if that's what you need. But don't call it growth if it's just a more elegant way to hide." He stood too, tension in his shoulders. "I've lived in shadows for so long, Lena. What if I don't know how to stand in the light with someone else?" She stepped close. "Then learn, with me." His breath hitched, but he didn't answer. "Not yet." That evening, Lena stood in the garden alone, the porch light behind her casting a soft glow across the flowers. Josie was inside, brushing her hair for bed. Silas had turned in early. The world felt paused. Grant stepped onto the porch behind her, cane tapping gently against the wood. "I didn't say thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not turning away when I pulled back." She turned to face him. "You still haven't told me what you're going to do." "I'm not leaving," he said quietly. "Not unless you ask me to." Relief washed over her, but she didn't show it. "I want to stay here, finish what we started." "Fight for this place, for us," she nodded. "Then let's make that official." He tilted his head. "How?" "By showing them it's not a scandal," she said. "It's a partnership." She reached into her pocket and pressed a folded flyer into his hand. He opened it slowly, fingers tracing the print. "Community gala?" he asked. "Fundraiser for the new center." "1 week from tonight. And you want us to go, together." "I want us to be seen, together." He smiled. "Then I guess I'll need a suit. And I'll need a dress," she said, a little breathless. "One that makes them forget I was ever just the janitor." He stepped closer. "You were never just anything, Lena." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. And in the soft, quiet dark of the garden, under a canopy of blooming life and whispered dreams, they stood side by side, not hiding, not afraid, just ready. The night of the gala arrived dressed in a silk sky. Stars scattered like invitations across the dark. The Whitaker estate shimmered under golden uplights, its columns wrapped in soft fabric, the garden strung with bulbs that cast a warm, flickering glow. For the first time in years, the house wasn't hiding. Lena stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of her deep emerald dress. It hugged her gently, modest but elegant, with a neckline that caught just enough light. Her hair was pulled up, soft curls falling behind her ears. She stared at her reflection and didn't quite recognize the woman staring back. But for once, she didn't flinch. "You ready?" Pearl's voice called from the doorway. Lena turned. "I think so." Pearl walked in slowly, eyes scanning her from head to toe. "You look like a promise someone finally kept." Lena blinked, breath catching. "He kept it." Pearl nodded. "Then hold your head high, baby. You didn't come this far to second-guess your own worth." Lena took one last look at herself, then reached for her small clutch. "Let's go." The main garden was already full when she arrived. Neighbors, former skeptics, curious townsfolk, a few city board members. Murmurs rose like wind through grass as she entered. But this time she didn't shrink. Then, from across the courtyard, she saw him. Grant stood near the fountain, a soft navy suit tailored to him like he was born to wear it. Silas stood close by, speaking with a guest, but Grant was still, head lifted, expression calm. He turned slightly at the sound of her steps. "Lena?" She moved toward him slowly. "I'm here," he smiled. "I thought I'd be the one who couldn't stop staring." "You still might be." He reached out his hand, and she placed hers in his. "You smell like rosemary and something expensive," he said. "Just confidence," she teased. A soft chuckle escaped his lips. "Then I'm overdressed." They turned together, walking into the garden like a pair rehearsed by time. Conversations paused, heads tilted, but no one dared say a word out loud. Lena leaned close. "We're doing this." "Yes," he said. "We are." A woman in a silver shawl approached. One of the council members. "Mr. Whitaker," she said with a polished smile. "And Miss Matthews. Lovely evening. This turnout is unexpected." "It's amazing what happens when you invite everyone," Lena replied with a quiet strength. Grant nodded. "We wanted the community to feel this house was theirs too." The woman glanced between them, smile tightening slightly. "Well, people are certainly talking." "Good," Grant said without hesitation. "We've spent too long pretending stories like ours don't happen." The woman blinked, surprised. "Stories like yours?" Grant leaned slightly toward Lena. People who find each other on uneven ground and build something level. The councilwoman gave a polite nod and moved on. Lena let out a soft breath. "You okay?" he asked. She looked up at him. "I think I finally am." They drifted toward the rear patio, where Silas motioned to them. "Time to speak," he said. Lena froze. "What?" Grant smiled. "You're the one they came to see." "I thought this was your house." "It is," he said, "but you're its voice now." Lena stepped onto the small raised platform, palms sweating, stomach tight. Grant touched her back gently. "Just speak the truth." She turned toward the crowd. Lights reflected in champagne glasses. Dozens of faces, some skeptical, some supportive, most waiting. She took a breath. "When I first walked through the doors of this estate," she said, voice steady, "I was just trying to earn a paycheck. I didn't think this house had anything to offer me. I didn't think I belonged." She paused. "But then I met someone who didn't look at me, but somehow still saw me." The air thickened. "This isn't just a home anymore. It's a place for healing, for music, for growth. It's where kids will learn to dance, where neighbors will create, where strangers will feel like they've always been welcome." She turned slightly toward Grant, who stood with his chin lifted, still and listening. "And this man beside me didn't save me, and I didn't save him. We just gave each other space to be known, and that's enough." A beat of silence, then applause. It wasn't roaring, but it was real. Later, as the crowd thinned and the stars pushed deeper into the sky, Lena and Grant walked slowly along the edge of the garden. "You were right," she said. "About what?" "They were listening." He squeezed her hand gently. "You gave them something worth hearing." She smiled through the emotion rising in her chest. "I've never felt this full and terrified all at once." "Then we're on the right track." She looked over at him, her voice soft and breaking. "I don't want to lose this." He stopped, turned toward her. "You won't." But even as he said it, the air shifted, like something was waiting just out of sight. And Lena knew. The storm wasn't over. It was just circling. It was just after sunrise when the letter arrived. Lena found it on the edge of the kitchen counter, addressed in a formal hand, the envelope thick, sealed with an embossed crest she didn't recognize. She stared at it, already knowing it wouldn't be good. Silas walked in a moment later, wiping his hands on a towel. He paused when he saw her holding it. "I was going to tell you," he said. "Didn't want to cloud the gala." Lena looked up. "What is it?" He exhaled. "Margaret filed a petition. She's leveraging part of the family trust to halt the community renovations." Lena's fingers tightened around the envelope. "She's trying to stop the center?" "She's not saying that directly," Silas replied. "She's calling it a preservation request. Claims the original structure is being compromised, that Grant's judgment is too emotionally involved." Lena's heart sank. "And the board?" "They're split. Some still follow her blindly. Others were at the gala last night. You made an impression." She turned the envelope over in her hands. "Does Grant know?" Silas hesitated. "He will. I haven't had the chance." "Let me tell him." Silas gave her a long look. "You sure?" Lena nodded. "It should come from someone who loves the house as much as he does." Grant was already in the garden room, his fingers trailing lightly across the keys of the piano. He wasn't playing, just letting the notes find him. Lena stepped in, the letter still in her hand. "I got something for you," she said quietly. Grant turned toward her voice. "Morning, sweetheart." She didn't smile. He caught the shift in her silence instantly. "What is it?" She stepped closer. "Margaret filed a petition. She's trying to block the renovations." His jaw tightened. "She waited until the day after the gala. She wanted to see if we'd flinch." He took a slow breath, grounding himself. What's the basis? Emotional bias, misuse of family property. She's questioning your capability to manage the estate. Grant stood slowly, moving toward the window as if the sun could help make sense of it. This house was stagnant for years. No one cared what I did with it as long as it stayed quiet. She cared the moment you gave it a voice. Grant turned back to her, his expression unreadable. Do you think she's right? Lena stepped closer. About what? That I'm too emotionally involved. She hesitated only a second. Yes. His brow lifted. And that's exactly why you should be the one leading this. He let out a quiet, bitter laugh. The board won't see it that way. Then show them. Remind them what this place looks like when it's alive. What it sounds like when kids laugh in the halls. What it feels like when the doors stay open. Grant was quiet for a long moment. She'll make this ugly, Lena. She already has. Now we make it honest. He tilted his face toward her. This changes things. It only changes how loud we have to be. He reached out, resting his hands on her shoulders. You don't have to stay in the middle of this. You didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for any of it, she said, eyes shining. But I chose it. His voice dropped. Even if I lose? I'm not here for your victories, Grant. I'm here for your truth. He breathed in, slow and deep. Then let's fight the way we built this. Open hands, clear voices, and no apologies, she added. He nodded. No more hiding. No more waiting for permission. Later that evening, Lena stood alone in the West Wing, running her hand across the edge of the blueprint table. A chill moved through the room, not from temperature, but from uncertainty. She pulled out a folded newspaper tucked between the pages of the community board documents. A headline stared back at her. Local estate faces legal dispute over public access plan. A smaller photo beneath it, her. Standing beside Grant at the gala, smiling. The story was spreading. She set it down, heart heavy but eyes clear. Footsteps behind her, Grant's voice. It started, hasn't it? She turned to him. Yes. He stepped beside her, placing his hand over hers on the table. It's going to get harder, he said. She met his gaze. Then we hold on tighter. He nodded, quietly moved, and for a long while, they stood there in the half-finished room. The blueprints, the notes, the photos of kids who hadn't danced here yet. It all stretched around them like a question, waiting for an answer. They weren't afraid of the noise. They were ready to speak louder. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, official. Grant could feel that just from the weight of it in his hand. He sat on the porch swing, Lena beside him, the night heavy with the scent of rain, even though the sky had yet to break. Silas had handed him the letter an hour ago, saying nothing, just giving that firm nod that meant, this matters. It came from the family trust board. Margaret's doing, of course. A hearing date was set. 1 week. They were going to try to freeze all modifications to the estate until further notice. Grant didn't open the letter. He didn't need to. I knew it would come to this, he said quietly. Lena shifted beside him. And still, you stayed. He tilted his head toward her. You ever get tired of being braver than me? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm not braver. I just don't have as much to lose. Grant's hand found hers. Don't say that. It's true. No, you have more to lose. You have us to lose. Her breath caught. He leaned back, listening to the wind stir the trees. I never cared about the money. Not really. I told myself I did, because numbers don't lie. But now, I'm realizing all I ever wanted was for this house to mean something after I'm gone. It already does, she whispered, but not in their eyes. They don't get to decide that. He was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, older, worn at the creases. Lena watched him place it in her hand. "What is this?" "My father's final note to me. He wrote it a few weeks before the accident." She unfolded the paper with care, her eyes scanning the slanted writing. A few lines stood out. "Grant, build something that outlives your pride. Not just with walls, but with people. Don't protect this house. Let it breathe." She looked up, blinking fast. "He didn't want you to guard it like a relic." Grant's voice cracked. "He wanted me to open it. I just didn't know how." Lena touched the edge of the letter. "And now? Now I want to do it with you." She folded the paper back slowly. "Then let's make it real. Let's open the doors before they try to lock them shut." He turned to her. "What do you mean?" "Invite the town. All of it. Before the hearing. Not a gala, not donors, just people. Neighbors, kids, families. Let them see what this place already is." He nodded slowly, something lighting in his chest. "A housewarming." Lena smiled. "Exactly." 3 days later, the gates of the Whitaker estate swung open. Word spread fast. There were no velvet ropes, no dress codes, just long tables covered in quilts, food from local bakeries, lemonade in tall glass pitchers. Kids ran through the garden, laughter echoing through the once quiet halls. Musicians played near the fountain, local high school jazz band. A few of the girls from Josie's dance class performed barefoot on the stone path. It wasn't polished, but it was perfect. Lena stood near the main doors, watching it unfold. Grant moved through the space slowly, arm linked with Silas when needed, never hurried. People came up to him, neighbors, teachers, parents, some skeptical. Most surprised, all listening. She heard one woman whisper, "I didn't know this place could feel like this." Another man added, "Looks like he's finally letting it live." As the sun dipped low, casting everything in warm amber light, Lena joined Grant near the piano room. He turned to her, a soft smile forming. "It worked. You're not supposed to be surprised." "I'm not. I'm just grateful." They stood there, the sound of children's footsteps and distant music weaving between them. Then Grant said quietly, "I wrote something." She raised her brow. "Wrote?" "A letter. For the hearing." "Do you want me to read it?" "I want you to read it there." Out loud. Her chest tightened. "Grant, they need to hear it. But they need to hear it from the person who made all of this possible." She hesitated. "That's a lot to ask. You've carried bigger things." She looked at him, emotion rising fast in her throat. "You trust me with your voice. I trust you with my name." And in that moment, Lena understood. This fight wasn't just about blueprints or boards or even legacy. It was about being seen. And she was ready to be seen too. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and quiet dread. Lena stood just inside the doorway, her fingers pressed lightly to the folded letter in her hand. The room was smaller than she expected, intimate even, but that only made the silence feel louder. Grant sat to her left, expression composed but distant, like he was trying to disappear inside himself. Margaret was already seated at the far table, flanked by 2 attorneys in dark suits. She didn't look at them when they entered. She didn't need to. Her message had been loud enough. This house belongs to the past. Stop dragging it into the present. Lena glanced at Grant. You sure? He turned his head toward her voice. Only about you. A clerk called the room to order. The hearing began. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, just legal terms wrapped in polite language, that cut sharper than steel. Excessive renovations, compromised structural heritage, concerns about long-term management. Lena listened, each phrase like a tiny thread, pulling apart the future they'd started building. She wanted to interrupt, to speak, but she waited. The judge's voice was calm, measured. "We've reviewed the petition and supporting documentation. Before making a final decision, we'll allow a statement from the estate's current trustee, Mr. Grant Whitaker, or his designated representative." All eyes turned toward Grant. He didn't rise. Instead, he gently tapped Lena's hand. And she stood. The room shifted as she stepped forward. Some faces registered confusion. Others recognition. But none of that mattered now. She unfolded the letter, the pages trembling slightly in her hands. "My name is Lena Matthews," she began, her voice clear but low. "I was hired as a janitor at the Whitaker estate nearly 6 months ago. That was supposed to be it. A quiet job, a quiet place." She looked at Grant, then back at the room. But what I found wasn't just a house. It was a man who'd stopped asking the world to see him. And a house that had stopped believing it had anything left to give. She paused, letting the silence breathe. "This letter," she continued, holding it up, "was written by Mr. Whitaker." "I'll read it now," as he asked. She cleared her throat and began. "To the board, the community, and anyone who still believes this house is only brick and inheritance. You see my name and think of the past. My father's wealth. The history tucked into these walls. But this house is no longer about what was. It's about what can be." And that shift didn't happen because of design plans or budget lines. It happened because someone walked into my life and reminded me that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build while you're still here. I am blind. But in the past year, I have seen more clearly than I ever did before. I've seen children laughing in hallways that once echoed with emptiness. I've seen a woman restore life into rooms I had abandoned. I've seen this estate become a home, not just for me, but for others. If this board still believes that emotion disqualifies action, then you misunderstand what this house truly is. It's not a monument. It's a mirror, and for the first time, I like what I see in it. Lena's voice faltered at the last line. She folded the letter and held it tightly in her hands. "I don't speak for legacy," she said quietly, "but I stand beside it, and I believe, truly, that this place is meant for more than memories." She returned to her seat. The room held stillness like glass. The judge nodded once. "We'll recess briefly before our decision." Grant leaned over, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were perfect." Lena shook her head. "No, I just told the truth." They waited. 15 minutes felt like hours. Then the judge returned. "We've reviewed the statement, the petition, and the record of community activity connected to the estate. We find no legal basis to suspend current development. The petition is denied." Grant exhaled, slow and deep. Margaret didn't move. Didn't speak. Just gathered her things with the same quiet precision she always carried like armor. As she passed them, she paused. "You made quite the impression, Miss Matthews." Lena met her gaze. "No, he did. I just helped him say it out loud." Margaret looked at Grant, something almost respectful flickering in her eyes. Then she walked away. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like jasmine and pavement and fresh-cut hope. Grant turned his face toward the warmth. "We won." Lena smiled. "No. We earned it." He reached for her hand. "Let's go home." Autumn settled over Savannah like a lullaby. The Whitaker estate stood golden and alive, its vines trimmed, its doors open, its windows lit from within. What had once been silent was now a place of music, laughter, and movement. The West Wing had reopened as a creative center, just 2 weeks after the board's final decision. What was once whispered about behind closed doors was now spoken of with pride on front porches and in cafes. And tonight, the garden was full. Lena walked the flagstone path barefoot, her heels forgotten beside the piano room steps. Warm lights strung across the magnolia branches overhead blinked against the dusky sky. Children danced under them, some rehearsing their recital routines, some just spinning in joy. Josie stood at the center in a pale blue dress, eyes wide, cheeks glowing. "You're sure she's ready?" Lena asked, glancing over her shoulder. Grant smiled from where he sat near the edge of the garden, his cane resting against the chair arm. "I'm not," he said. "But she is." Music began to play, a gentle track from an old upright speaker tucked near the garden's corner. Josie took her first step in time with the melody, graceful and slow. The garden hushed. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Grant leaned slightly toward the sound. "Describe it." Lena knelt beside him. "The lights are glowing like fireflies. She's wearing that dress you helped her pick out. Her arms move like she's painting the air. Her feet barely touch the ground." He nodded. "She's flying." "She is." They watched, or in Grant's case, listened, until the last note played. Josie ended in a soft curtsy, the applause rising like thunder. She looked directly at them, then ran into Lena's arms, breathless and radiant. "I did it." "You more than did it," Lena whispered, brushing a curl from Josie's forehead. Grant stood slowly, guided by the familiar path. "You were magic." Josie threw her arms around him. "I couldn't hear anything but the music. It felt like floating." "That's what it's supposed to feel like." Silas approached with 2 glasses of cider, nodding his quiet approval. "You've built something," he said. Grant turned to him. "We've built something." They stood together, watching as the guests began to drift toward the buffet tables and benches. Conversations bubbled up again, but the joy lingered, soft and steady. Later, when the sky had gone full dark, and most of the guests had gone home, Lena and Grant walked the garden path slowly. The stones were still warm from the day. His hand found hers easily now, no hesitation, no second-guessing. "I keep thinking this place will stop surprising me," he said. "And then it doesn't." He stopped walking. "Do you know what I remember most about the night we met?" Lena smiled. "The sugar bowl?" He laughed. "That. And your voice?" "The way it didn't flinch. You weren't trying to impress me. You were just honest. I didn't think you'd remember. It's the only thing I see clearly." She stepped in front of him, her voice soft. "You know, I never planned to stay this long. I know. But I've never felt more seen." He took her other hand. "Then stay longer." She tilted her head. "How much longer?" Grant reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. Simple, weathered. Not new, not flashy, just real. He opened it to reveal a single ring. Gold, brushed, delicate. Lena's breath caught. "My mother's," he said. "She told me to give it to someone who could turn silence into music." She blinked fast. "You don't have to." "I know," he said gently. "But I want to." Her voice shook. "Then yes." He slid it onto her finger. It fit like it had always been waiting. And there, beneath the glowing branches of a garden that once held only ghosts, they kissed, Soft, slow, sure. A promise wrapped in night air. The wind picked up. Somewhere in the house, the piano began to play. One of the students, practicing a melody that drifted like memory. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. "Funny," she murmured. "What is?" "I thought I came here to clean floors." Grant smiled. "You did?" She looked at him, eyes shining. "But I stayed to build a life." He took a slow breath, the kind you take when everything inside you finally feels still. "You don't need eyes to see love," he said. "You just need to stop hiding from it." She nodded, pressing her forehead gently against his. And in that moment, with bare feet on old stones and the future unfolding like a melody, everything made sense. Not perfect, but true. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way.